Hi, welcome to JCT. Jim Cantelon here. Always pleasure, friends, to have you come our way. You're in for a real treat today. You don't often sit down with a young medical doctor who's also an internist, a specialist in internal medicine, who also has a great consuming passion for proper nutrition, fitness, healthy lifestyle, and can present it in such a refreshing way. Well, Sasha Hai, Dr. Sasha Hai, is exactly that person. We're going to find out a lot from her about healthy living. And I think one of the things she may be discussing is something I read in one of her blogs about food being a medicine. Whoever thought in those terms? And yet she sees a definite correlation between some of our nagging afflictions and the food we eat, and perhaps the way we eat it, the role of what she calls empty calories in the whole equation. And speaking as an internist working at a major hospital in the Metro Toronto area, she speaks with great authority. And so this is the kind of interview you might want to sit there with a notebook and just make a few notes, because it's information that's going to be very, very helpful as you order your life. So don't miss Dr. Sasha Hai.
Very few African mothers ever see a doctor or midwife, yet each mother knows how fragile her child's life is. You see, 26,000 children under the age of 5 will die today because they don't have access to medical care. Your gift of $260, just $22 every month, helps stock a mobile clinic and train healthcare workers to care for young mothers and their children during pregnancy and preschool years. Join WOW Mother Care now. Protect the life of a mother and her child.
I don't know about you, friends, but I'm a sucker for the latest book on healthy lifestyle. You go to your typical bookstore or even go on the internet now these days, and there's scores and scores of titles on how to eat, what not to eat, how to run, how not to run, how to walk, how not to walk. Well, we're going to solve all of that right now. Sasha Hai is here. Thank you for coming our way, Sasha. You're an internist. You work out of the Credit Valley Hospital in Mississauga, Ontario. Recently, 4 years now, working as a specialist in internal medicine. How is it that an internist has an interest in things like avoiding empty calories and running and fitness and all this other stuff that seems more of the province of self-help books?
Yeah, I mean, you put it so well. It's true. There's advice coming from every single direction. I think for me, it was that as an internist, I got very used to seeing what sickness looks like. That's pretty much what I see all the time at the hospital. I see sick people, and I get used to seeing what sickness is, and it became very dissatisfying to just be kind of managing sickness, managing chronic illnesses without speaking to, hey, what does it mean to live a healthy lifestyle, and how can we potentially prevent all of these things so that we can live in health as opposed to living in sickness.
Let's just back up for a minute, just so people understand context. You're a specialist. It takes a long time through medical school and then to develop your specialty in internal medicine. What is an internist, and what is it that makes you a specialist?
Right. So as a specialist is basically someone who just needs a referral from a family physician to be seen, because I don't manage primary care. As an internist, I work in a hospital setting. So if someone is admitted to the hospital and requiring admission for some sort of medical illness that doesn't need surgery, then I would be who would look after them.
Okay, so it's a non-surgical kind of specialty.
Correct. So I might manage someone who came in with congestive heart failure and their kidneys are failing at the same time, and they also have diabetes. So my practice is looking at multiple medical illnesses and looking after kind of the whole person.
You mentioned diabetes. Is it almost epidemic these days, diabetes?
It really is, yeah. We have a tremendous issue with type 2 diabetes in Canada. And we're seeing it in younger and younger patients these days as well. So again, this is one of the chronic illnesses that people live with that can, there is a genetic component for sure, but it is also driven by what we call metabolic syndrome, or a part of metabolic syndrome. So increased weight also can drive diabetes, and our eating practices and our lifestyle definitely contribute to the development. So it's one of these illnesses that can be prevented, and if not prevented, at least delayed.
So, question, this is a general question, we can go in any number of directions. What is a healthy lifestyle? I mean, there's so much out there telling you one thing's healthy, another thing's healthy. I mean, your eyes glaze over after a while, and you finally, people say, "How you doing, Jim?" I say, "Well, at least I'm vertical. So I guess I'm still alive." But what's healthy?
Yeah, I think a healthy lifestyle can be different for different people, but I think it should define you functioning in your best health possible so that you can accomplish all the things that you want to do. You have the energy that you want to have. You feel comfortable in your body. You have a balance of your family time, your work life, your physical fitness. So it touches upon multiple spheres. Your spirit, it touches upon your physical health, and it touches upon your emotional health as well.
So this is pretty holistic, right? It's not.
Yes.
It's more than just keeping a certain metabolic balance. It has to do, as you say, with your relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's much more holistic than me giving you a pill for high blood pressure, right? Which is what I do as an internist, and kind of what I found very unsatisfying, which is why I started looking more at the prevention piece.
So do you find yourself conflicted? On the one hand, you can write a prescription. On the other hand, you're trying to be proactive and preemptive in terms of health. Do you ever think, well, maybe I'm trying to do two jobs at the same time here?
I think the two go hand in hand, very much so. So on the one hand, if someone comes in and their blood pressure's through the roof, I definitely say, I recommend that we start you on this blood pressure pill, and I'm going to explain why. It's not because I want to push pills on anyone, but the safest thing to do at this stage is to start you on this blood pressure pill. But at the same time, let's look at how we can help your blood pressure through your lifestyle. So studies have shown that just a 5 to 10% reduction in weight can make a significant impact on blood pressure pills. So one of the greatest areas of satisfaction for me is when I help someone to get their weight into a healthier range, and we can actually start taking them off their blood pressure pills.
Yeah. Nutrition is a big component. Tell me about nutrition.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard it said probably that food is our biggest medicine, right? So that's our fuel. The thing about food, though, is it ends up not being only about fuel, but it's also tied to our emotions. It's tied to pleasure, and so we end up eating for a lot of different reasons, not just to provide our bodies with sustenance.
Now, you mentioned in your blogging and your sort of self-revelatory moments that you've not always been a healthy eater yourself.
Sorry.
You disagree with me there? Okay, let me just read it for you right here. Yeah, here we go. I hope that this isn't too awkward for you.
No, you just caught me off guard.
I just caught you off guard here. But I don't want to be held back by sickness, obesity, sluggishness, or insecurities that stem from disordered eating.
Yes. Okay.
And in parenthesis, I have struggled with this.
I'm gonna go into that. Let's explain what I meant by that.
What did you mean by that?
I think as I was referring to, we can often use food in unhealthy ways, right? There's a lot of emotional eating and people who use food to meet emotional needs, like if they're bored or they're sad. And I think for me, food has been something that I've used in an unhealthy manner sometimes. So I read the book. Have you heard of the book Made to Crave by Lisa TerKeurst?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic book. And she talks about how, we're all made to crave something. We're made to crave God, relationship with Him. And sometimes when that area of our lives isn't healthy, we can turn to food and start craving food instead. And I think that is one area where I've struggled is if I'm not feeling great or or I'm bored or something, that I have used food to kind of fill that void instead of going to the Lord. So it is something that I have to consciously be aware of all the time, and an area that I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Now, you're not necessarily talking about an eating disorder here.
No. So not a diagnosis of anorexia or bulimia or anything like that. Like, there's very real diagnoses of eating disorders. It's more disordered eating, which is a different thing altogether.
Well, I'm glad I got some clarification there. Let's get back to this business about food. You talk about food as medicine. Are you serious about that? Like, is food like medicine?
Certainly. I mean, it's something that we ingest, we put into our bodies. It provides fuel to our cells, and food can either be very beneficial, or if we're eating kind of processed foods and there's a lot of chemicals in there that are not serving our bodies very well.
Is processed food the enemy? Like, I read so much.
Some people would say sugar is the enemy, but
yeah, I read so much about processed food, and nobody says anything positive about it. And yet, you go to the typical grocery store, and about 60% of the food you can buy is processed.
Yeah, I mean, it's the easy solution, right? It's the easy solution for the person who doesn't really want to take the time to cook or doesn't know how to cook. It's much easier to grab a box, and it's much more satisfying than cooking yourself because it's full of sugar, as we talked about a second ago. It's full of salt or sodium, and so it kind of fills those cravings and causes that high that you get from eating food, because you can get a release of certain hormones in the brain, like dopamine, that give you this that really good feeling that you get from eating.
Yeah, I get that feeling when I eat chips and dill pickle dip. which I cannot resist. I tell Kathy I'm going to start calling chips and dill pickle dip Kathy, because I can't resist her either. Fitness. We're talking not just food, but also exercise. Now, you look pretty fit to me. Are you an exerciser?
I am. It's something that for me, I'm lucky because I enjoy it. And I know that not everyone does, although I'm convinced that once you push yourself a little bit and you get past a certain point, I think everyone can enjoy it. But
what do you do? Walk, run, lift weights?
I'm a runner, and I love lifting weights, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think not enough people and not enough women recognize the importance of building muscle and maintaining muscle, especially with aging, which is something we're going to talk about, I think, at another segment. So I am a big fan of lifting weights, and it's something that I promote for sure.
Well, so am I. And as you can see, I'm slim like you are.
Yeah.
The weightlifting's done me a lot of good. Actually, weightlifting does build muscle, there's no doubt about it, and I've been doing it for over 40 years. And my father taught me years ago, he said, your number one enemy, Jim, is gravity. He says, if you can stay vertical, you're more than halfway there. Okay, I'm going to tell you, the audience, that I'm sure you're intrigued with this woman, as am I, and I'm going to be interviewing her several more times, and we'll be, over the course of the summertime, you'll be hearing more from Dr. Sasha High. She really has a lot to share, and I'm looking forward to those upcoming interviews. Thanks so much, Sasha. We'll talk again. So I'll be back with Bible Studies right after this.
This is a Voice of the Martyrs Canada news update, a special report.
More than 200,000 Syrians have lost their lives in 4+ years of armed conflict. About a quarter of them were Christians. Prior to the uprising and then the war, there were about 3 million Christians in the country. About half of them have left, and most of the rest want to leave as well.
It breaks my heart to see what is happening to my nation with all the terrorism and the violence among the people.
If you would have come to Syria before, you would have seen how it was full of churches and beautiful Christian places, and now it's all gone. It's all destroyed.
Amani was encouraged by the concern and support of the Voice of the Martyrs Canada, but is pleading with Christians everywhere to continue to pray.
For more information, visit www.vomcanada.com.
When I'm prepping for these studies, I read not only the scripture, but I read as much background material as I can. I'm not an academic. I need help when I'm studying Greek and Hebrew, but I can wade through it with help. But occasionally I come across something and I say, gee whiz, I wish I'd said that. And here's something from an old theologian who wrote about 100 years ago, and I love the way some of these old writers used to write, their facility with English language. It's just terrific. But we're talking here about verse 11. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. And the word joy just jumps out at you there, okay? My joy, your joy. Here's what this old theologian has to say. Confessedly, the New Testament is a grave and even a stern book, never shirking ugly facts, but facing them with honesty and frankness. Yet could we read it for the first time, what would strike us most in it would surely be that this is the happiest book in the whole world. It thrills with joy. Its message is a gospel, a shout of good news. It is the breaking through of midday sunshine on a morning that had been bleak and gray. So Christ himself quite certainly meant it to be. When he had started on his ministry, but was back for a time in his own Nazareth, they asked him to take part in the service of the synagogue, and he stood up to read and found the place where it was written from Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives, recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. He closed the book and sat down and said, in this the prophet speaks of me, and today all this has come to pass. You know, this old writer is right on. Unfortunately, religion, as we call it, if it were to be described, by the average person in the street, invariably would probably be described as a kind of a stern and gloomy thing. A lot of rules, a lot of regulations, a lot of moralizing, a lot of killjoy stuff. And in many ways, when people describe it that way, what they're describing is what they have been taught or what they have discovered on those occasions when they have been in a church service setting. And often, in movies and in books, the religious person is portrayed as the inflexible, stern, moral legalist who's constantly spouting scripture and condemning the world and judging everybody all the time. Well, of course, if that's the case, then who wants it? Who needs it? The gospel presents itself as the word gospel itself says. It is good news. It's not bad news. It's not saying to the prisoner, well, you deserve to be there, and I've got another reason to give you another life sentence. Okay? It doesn't say to the little girl who's been sexually abused all her life and has found it safer on the streets and not, that she's condemned to hell forever because of her prostitution. It doesn't say to the drunkard, because of your lack of self-control, you've only got what you deserve, and you got to hit rock bottom before you'll ever come up. With this kind of, that's not how the gospel approaches us. The gospel approaches the street worker, the drunk, the drug addict, the prisoner, the poor, the hopeless, with this profound message. You are a creation of God. You have beauty you do not realize. You have been created in the image of God. You have the very breath of God in you. And you are of such value that God sent his Son to die for your sin. Yeah. You mean, if I was the only person on earth, Jim, and I was no good, wife beater and had deserted my family, and yes, I'd be full of regret, but at the same time, there was no going back, that Jesus would die for me? Yeah. That's the good news. And how can you do anything with that good news but just smile and dance in wonder and thank God for his grace and run to his arms? This is what Jesus is talking about here. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. You know, the old adage, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Jesus has given us so much. And in giving us so much, he himself has been blessed. It has fulfilled his joy to see us redeemed. Mankind on a path to destruction, saved and bought back. That's what redemption means, redeemed from the evil one and given new life and new hope and a future. This is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news. And so there is much reason for joy in Christian faith. Much reason for singing and dancing and feasting and fellowship and laughter and good times. In fact, when you read about the end of days and the judgment of the world, the gospel, or I should say the Bible, is full of the imagery of a huge banquet. What do people love to do almost more than anything else? Get together with other people over a meal and just eat and drink and enjoy one another's company and laugh and be merry. And who cares what time it is? Let's just have fun until we have to go to sleep. You know, we're pretty basic. And it doesn't take a lot for us to be joyful. Well, Jesus talks about us being his joy, and he talks about himself as our joy. And in both cases, a complete joy, a total joy, a fulfilled joy that knows no bounds. I mean, it's terrific. And then he gets back to the love thing. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. He keeps beating on that. You know, by this shall all men know you're my disciples, that you have loved one for another. Love, love, love. The gospel is the good news of the love of God and the love of neighbor. You just can't get away from it. And greater love is known than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And of course, Jesus is referring right to himself. It's like he's pointing at himself. He's going to lay down his life for his friends. I'm not sure the disciples really captured this, but Jesus saw them as his friends, all right? Let's move on. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I've made known to you. I've done my messenger service very well here. You didn't choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit. Remember the vine and the branches? We're still, this conversation is still done in the context of the vine and the branches. Fruit that will last, so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Again, in the context of that vine's DNA that has been invested in you as a branch, right? You will produce the fruit that is commensurate with your nature. This is my command: love each other. Love each other. Again and again and again and again, the story is the story of love. And the fact that ultimately the choice begins with the Lord. You know, I hear this a lot. We talk about our love for God. We don't spend a lot of time or enough time talking about God's love for us. You know, we talk about the commitment we made to the Lord. You know, I made a commitment. As for me and my house, I'm going to serve the Lord. But, you know, human commitments have a way of rising and falling, being strong and then being weak, subject to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, ebb and flow, all of those things. We sometimes lack faithfulness. What we must remember is that God's love for us never fails. His faithfulness never wavers. There is no up and down. There is no ebb and flow with God's love for us. And that in itself is absolutely inspiring. And so the next time, you know, you're concerned about your lack of performance, take comfort in the fact that your Heavenly Father is performing very well, thank you very much. And He has chosen you. And because He has chosen you, at one point, you will choose Him. Let's see if I get back to where I was. No. There you go. This is not rocket science, friends. Way beyond, rocket science is way beyond me. I can hardly handle this iPad. Okay? You didn't choose me, I chose you, and I appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit. The ultimate goal is that we be a fruitful branch as we are part of the vine. And Jesus Himself is a true vine. And as long as we stay attached to Him, He will not fail, and ultimately, neither will we. More next time.
Very few African mothers ever see a doctor or midwife, yet each mother knows how fragile her child's life is. You see, 26,000 children under the age of 5 will die today because they don't have access to medical care. Your gift of $260, just $22 every month, helps stock a mobile clinic and train healthcare workers to care for young mothers and their children during pregnancy and preschool years. Join WOW Mother Care now. Protect the life of a mother and her child.
You know, when we were looking at John and the subject of joy, I thought of so much else that is there in the New Testament on that topic. And I thought of Paul's words in Philippians when he was talking about, if you will, you know, in Sasha High's terms, healthy living. And he said in chapter 1 of Philippians, verse 21, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Meaning that as he lived his life from day to day, Christ was everything to him. And of course, he lived that way. He spent his whole time on this earth after his conversion, moving mountains, really, to reach as many people as possible with the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But then he says, to die is gain. And normally in these conversations with nutritionists and health fitness experts, we don't talk about death at all. Death is seen by most people to be the great leveler, kind of the end of it all. In Paul's case, he saw death as a great blessing because it was the gain, if you will, of heaven. It was the entry to the eternal dimension. It was what life was all about. And the next time you're getting a little down on yourself in terms of your advancing years, just remember the gain of heaven, and that should keep you at peace. See you next time.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon Today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon Today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.